I just don't think too much about things, and I'm just always optimistic. So, famous last words, things generally, I think, go right for me because I feel like they're going to be right. Some people might think that it's not right, but for me, I always find a good outcome.
Hello and welcome to the SheClicks Women in Photography podcast. I'm Angela Nicholson and I'm the founder of SheClicks, which is a community for female photographers. In these podcasts, I speak to women in the photographic industry to hear about their experiences, what drives them and how they got to where they are now. Today, I'm joined by pet, wildlife and creative nature photographer and also active SheClicker, Philippa Huber. Based in Wiltshire, Philippa combines her love of animals, nature and creativity with a photography business built around outdoor pet sessions and expressive nature photography. Hi Philippa, or Phil as I know you best. Welcome to the SheClicks Women in Photography podcast. It's really great to have the opportunity to catch up with you.
It is a real pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, you're very welcome. Now, I was thinking, with the exception of my mum, you are the SheClicker that I have known the longest time. And actually, there's only about 5 years in it. So there's not much to play for there. But it's really funny because I realised that it wasn't until I started SheClicks in 2018 that I discovered you were also into photography. So perhaps you can tell us a little bit about how you first discovered photography.
Yeah, so I've been doing photography a long time. 17 years old, on a campsite in France, I realised a Konica Minolta pop was not enough to photograph the swirls of smoke that I wanted to. Um, and so I asked for a proper camera for my 18th birthday, and was given a portable TV to take away to university instead. And then didn't get my own camera for 4 years, but as soon as I moved to France, I bought a second-hand Minolta SLR and started photographing then, learnt about dark rooms and developing, and yeah, been doing it ever since.
When you were in France and you were learning about dark rooms and developing film and making your own prints, did you have any thoughts about becoming a professional photographer, or was it purely for fun at that point?
I always wanted to be a photographer. It's really funny because thinking back, whenever I met anybody creative or interested in photography, that's what I'd say I wanted to do. But I was also having the time of my life living in France, and then I moved to Turkey and traveled around the world. So it was a lovely idea, but I never wanted to actually stop doing what I was doing. So the dream was there, but it wasn't a strong enough dream for me to sort of give it up and move back to the UK and do it the traditional way. And whenever I spoke to photographers, that's what they said was, you need to go back and sort of work under somebody and learn that way. And I always thought, I don't want to live in the UK. So I carried on doing what I was doing and had that as my sort of full-time hobby, really.
So when did photography switch from being a hobby to something you built your life around?
I started earning money from photography when we moved back to the UK. So my husband and I moved back in 2019. We bought a narrowboat and travelled around the country for the first 2.5, 3 years. And then all I was doing, I realise now, was just learning inside out how my camera works and how to photograph sort of on the fly, and particularly wildlife. And then probably about 3 years ago, I think we ended up in Wiltshire, maybe 4 years. And I would go off walking for days. Well, I'd come back to the boat at night, but I'd go off for massive walks with my camera and then took loads of photos, was editing them, not doing anything with them. And one day just sort of thought, there are markets around here. I'm going to go and sell my photos at a market. So I got some printed, and I've loved printed works. I've always loved quality photography or quality art and fine art papers and stuff. So right from the very beginning, I was using really good quality, prints and print companies. And that was the start of it. And it's sort of taken off.
But now you do more pet photography. So how did that come along?
I do. Because I was selling wildlife prints, and it was all sort of wildlife and canal scenes, obviously what was around me. So that was my sort of USP. And in Wiltshire, which is where I'm mostly based now, it's very rural, so there's a nice sort of audience for my work anyway. And it was as simple as one day a guy said, "Well, if you can photograph wildlife, you must be able to photograph my dog that wasn't trained." And I sort of went, "Oh, yeah, of course I can do that."
Yeah.
And he booked me to photograph his wife's dog, and I was really nervous. And I went to the location that we'd agreed multiple times, and it was going to be for the bluebells, and so there was all the paths there, and everything was sorted. And I hadn't counted on it being a sausage dog, so the dog was shorter than the bluebells. So again, straight away it was that whole think on your feet. You can't sort of act to this woman like I don't know what I'm doing. I had to make sure that
Yeah.
there was some good photos, and I got some amazing photos that are still some really popular that I show to clients, and they are great examples of a dog that never stopped moving,
Yeah.
that looks completely posed and perfect for the camera.
I've got a friend with a sausage dog, and they are great dogs to photograph, actually.
They're hilarious. Yes, yeah. But they're very short.
They are, yes, no taller than bluebells, as you say. So, how has your business evolved over the years then?
So it started off, I was doing markets and I do craft fairs, and it was wildlife photography. And now I do a regular market 2 days a week in the Shambles in Devizes. And there I've got um, regulars that know me and they get commissions and things like that. There's a few tourists that come through. And then sometimes I do sort of special pet stroke dog events where people are there just because they love dogs or they've got dogs and they're probably looking for a photographer. Um, and I sort of evolved from, I still sell prints, but I also make bags and mugs, and slates are very popular at the moment. And those sort of things I can print in my own workshop here. So, and then the pet photography is the bigger part of the business now. And I love that because every shoot's different. And my style is let's go with what the dog wants to do and I'll go with the flow. And they'll get sort of the natural photos, as well as at some point the dog stops, pauses and goes hello, and I'll get a beautiful photo of the dog, but I'll also get the silliness and the character of that dog. And then I don't just give them digi copies. It's all about a beautiful print or a big thing with lots of different pictures of the dog for their walls as well afterwards. And that is a big part of it for me. I love it.
Yeah. So, how do you select the images, or how do they select the images to print?
So after the shoot, I go back, download them, save them, and then do an initial cull, and then I edit a certain amount. And I'll always give them 2 or 3 of a very similar shot, because what I found very quickly was my favorite was probably not going to be their favorite. And it's again, I spend an hour and a half with their pet, so I think that's really cute, but they know that the dog does that, and that's the dog. So they come to my studio generally, and I have it prepared as a slideshow. So the first viewing is just a random slideshow. And because they've been involved in the shoot, then they relive the moments and, sort of what happened for me to get the shots. So, and that's really, really lovely. And then we look through them chronologically, and they then start sort of saying yes or no to the photos. Most people don't want just one photo, so the multi-aperture frames are lovely. And I always do a selection of sort of starting from 20 by 16 up to 30 by 24 with a few photos or a lot. And they may not really have a concrete idea, but when they see my ideas, it allows them to start picturing what they would like, and then we work it together.
Oh, sounds like a really pleasant experience, actually. I bet. I mean, people,
and they love it.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a dog. We love our dog, and
Yeah.
there's nothing better than looking at photos of your dog, so or
Yeah.
photographing your dog. Yeah. Oh, that sounds really nice. So, although the pet photography is a huge part of your business now, do you plan to continue with the markets?
Yes, and I'm not even hesitating with that. that's a
Yeah.
definite yes, because it's my shop front really. I've got a workshop here in Devizes where I meet my clients after the shoot, but most of them meet me face to face. And it's interesting how a lot of my clients don't realize they want their dog photographed until they see my photos. We have a chat, and
Hmm.
then they think, actually, that would be really good. So the markets will continue because it's a storefront, it's a face to face meeting. And I sell my wildlife work on the side. And I do like creative, abstract seascapes and nature as well, but I sometimes put those out just as a little sort of
Yeah.
mix. But yeah, the markets are important.
In addition to the contacts that you've made, what have you learned through being at the market and selecting the products that you are going to sell?
That it's not all about me. I
Okay.
found very quickly. Um, and I still do. My style was I like shooting through, which I still like doing, but I was always really drawn to sort of darker backgrounds with just a little bit of light.
Hmm.
And when people like that style, they love them, they want to buy them. It's brilliant. But the majority of people that I meet in the market want something that's much sort of lighter and brighter, uh, possibly cuter.
Uh-huh.
Um, so I do know now when I'm shooting with a thought to what might sell at a market, there's a very distinct gap between what I absolutely love myself and would want on my wall, but what I know is going to be commercially more sort of suitable to get printed for sale.
That's really interesting. So if you're photographing something, do you now sort of take one for you and one for the market?
Sometimes, yes. So I take a lot less photos than I used to, which and I know when I used to send in questions to the podcast, um, or when you did webinars and we could ask questions, I was always fascinated by how many photos these
Hmm.
photographers would take. Um, and I used to take so many, but then I'd have loads of time to do the editing on them and just play around with them. And I
Yeah.
don't have that time anymore. So I have to be a lot more kind of thoughtful about when I'm photographing and what I'm photographing. So I do, if I see something that I know is going to be nice and commercial, I'll just photograph it in that style. And then I try and go out just for me and my camera sometimes without a thought of would that sell or would it not
Yeah.
sell. It's just I like going out and just photographing for myself. And if something comes of it that I'll do sort of in my creative side, then so be it. But I try to just sort of find the fun in it again sometimes.
Do you think, because you only relatively recently switched from an SLR to mirrorless, do you
Yeah.
think shooting on a mirrorless camera has helped you with the sort of creative side, but also sort of reducing the number of shots so that you've got more, your hit rate is higher, basically?
I actually don't know.
Mm.
Um, with the pet photography, that's why I switched, and it's been just such a game changer for that. I use a Nikon Z8, and the eye focus and the speed of the two lenses that I use mostly, that's been a massive game changer. I wouldn't say
Mhm.
I take less shots just because I'll do more of a burst mode when a dog's
Yeah.
running towards me. So, but now I can sort of speed up the selection process by knowing that that's going to be a good one. I don't need to edit five just to choose one later.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's nice being able to see more or less what it's going to look like afterwards with the mirrorless, rather than I used a D750 before
Yeah.
and I still
Yeah.
take it out, and it still kind of catches me out that you know it isn't what I'm seeing exactly. But that's sometimes a
Yeah.
quite nice
Yeah.
surprise.
Yeah. I last used an SLR about a year ago, and I must admit, I was thinking, Where's the eye detection?"
Yeah,
That
yeah,
comes as a bit of a shock. Oh, yes,
yeah.
I remember
But
now.
I photographed a sort of Dalmatian cross last week,
Hmm.
and eye detection on that was that's quite interesting. Then you need to know quickly how to override the camera's
Yes.
kind of
I can
detection.
imagine. Yes, it probably thought it had lots and lots of eyes, I should think. Now, you've mentioned that you love printing.
Yeah.
What is it, do you think, about holding a piece of fine art or a printed image that is so special?
So I thinking back. I grew up in a house where they always, if we went on holiday, they'd buy something, and it was generally
Hmm.
something for the wall. So I think I grew up in a house where mum and dad would just buy lots of things. Um, I didn't grow up particularly with photos on the wall, but they liked art, and there were sort of books on the shelves about the pre-Raphaelites. And do you remember Kenneth Clark's Civilization book? So I don't know, it
Yeah.
just gave me a bit of an idea
Yeah.
of sort of painting and print. So when I had the opportunity to start printing, having things printed for me, I just let right in. And I remember during lockdown, we had a house at the time, so by law we had to go and live back in the house, and that's when I used to do the SheClicks Thursday coffee mornings.
Uh-huh.
And I turned a little bedroom into my workshop, or whatever you call it there, my little studio. And I just started printing, and then I would get some more printing. And it did get kind of out of control because we weren't really living in the house. But I just remember trying out different fine art papers and seeing the different textures and how they would affect the thing. And that was
Yeah.
mainly, I'd photographed the Dalmatian pelicans in that January, and so I'd got some sort of quite stark photos, and then I got some ICM and slow shutter of them sort of coming into land or flying next to me. And I just liked being able to get them printed on different paper and putting them on my wall for a little while. And it's gone on from there, really.
Yeah. Do you do your own printing or do you use a lab?
I use a lab, yeah,
Hmm.
and I use One Vision. They were the first lab that I used, and for me, when things go well, why sort of change them? And they've
Yeah.
always been absolutely amazing. And my fine art paper is permajet. And again, they've got such an amazing range. And if I've ever had any questions between permajet and One Vision, they've just always had the time to sort of offer advice and help. And the
Yeah.
rare, I think once I got a fine art print done, and it was this landscape, beautiful seascape over at the Isle of Man, and it came in, I think a hair or something must have been on the paper. It was just this tiny little flaw, and they replaced it immediately without hesitation. So when that happens, it's kind of, yeah, they're not quibbling with anything, and the
Yeah.
quality's really there.
That's good to know. So when you're looking at your pictures, what makes you pick one to print over another? What are you looking for?
Um, if I could print two, I'd probably print two, to be honest, and just keep them. It's hard for me. It's really quite. If I just really like the picture, I went to
Yeah.
Norway last January, and they're not even on my wall. But again, it was just I got one, and it was all very blue, and these mountains with snow, and this sort of grey ship coming in, and I got that printed on some permajet metallic paper just because I wanted to see what it was like. And that's just in a folder in my workshop now, and every so often I pull it out because I don't really have space on my walls. So I'm not very, I don't need a reason to get something printed. If I like a photo, I generally will sort of get it printed just to see what it looks like.
Okay.
That's a rubbish answer, sorry.
It's an honest answer. Let's say it's an honest answer. So I don't think you're not much of a planner, are you? When when you sort of find something is interesting, you go with the flow. When it's working, you continue with that flow.
Yeah.
But what advice would you give to other women who are interested in photography and thinking about maybe taking things further, but have concerns that they're not good enough?
You don't know until you try, which is, the biggest advice I think I could give anybody is, and it's a cliche, but everybody says your regrets are for what you don't do rather than what you do. So you can
Yeah.
try it, and you might realize you don't like speaking to the public. So, but you've tried it at least, and they
Hmm.
won't remember that you didn't like speaking to them. They'll just sort of probably think you're absolutely fine, and it was
Yeah.
quite a nice display. And once you've done, especially with sort of the markets and the craft fairs, people are generally, they're welcoming and friendly. In my experience, there's not a great deal of photographers doing it. Um, I would say make a nice display. But yeah, my main thing would be just if you don't try, you don't know. So try.
Okay. Give it a whirl. I think that's a good time to go to 6 from SheClicks. I've got 10 questions. Actually, I've got quite a lot more than 10 questions, but I've put 10 questions to one side, and I'd like you to answer 6, please, by picking
Okay.
numbers from 1 to 10. So could I have your
Okay.
first number, please?
Number 10, please. I can't believe I'm answering 6 from SheClicks.
Right, a few people asked this. What would be your dream commission?
Oh God, I have dream commissions all the time, honestly.
Okay,
Um,
let's hear one.
because so I'm doing the thing is because I don't particularly like planning, I love the element of surprise. So, and that's
Hmm.
more why I like people saying where they'd like to have their dog photographed rather than me suggesting. So, my dream commission would be I just a fun dog in. I like beach. I've only done one shoot on the beach, and I
Yeah.
really like that. I do like being able to get in a stream myself with the dog. So
Hmm.
um, so that would be good. Yeah,
Something
beach.
involving water then, a stream or a
Yeah, I
beach or,
do. I do
yeah.
like getting in and having the dogs splashing around. Yeah, yeah.
Barefoot, soggy feet,
No, no. Wellies.
wellies.
Sometimes they have a hole that I'm not aware of. But yeah,
You
I
soon
sort of
become aware
wear.
of it though.
You do, yes. No, I wear lots of sort of old dirty clothes so that I never have to think twice about getting muddy or wet or dirty.
Okay. Could I have your second number, please?
Number 2, please.
Number 2. Right, Philippa. We first met online during the SheClicks lockdown coffee morning Zoom calls, and I remember being fascinated by your life on a canal boat. Do you feel that living on the water influences your photography, either in how you see light, the pace of you work at, the gear you use, or the stories you're drawn to? That question is from Carmen.
Oh, Carmen, great
Mm.
question. So I think the basics of living on a boat, I move home, the equivalent of moving home
Hmm.
every 2 weeks. And back in the day, I was moving home every 2 days. So, and I think that sort of suits this whole the spontaneity that I have. So
Yeah,
I I'm really happy to get up really early to do a shoot, but I'd like to get up really early to do a shoot in a different place one day or another. So I think that influence, that sort of reflects my style of photography, which is I'm not someone who keeps revisiting the same place
yeah.
to do you know, the Four Seasons or the different atmospheres. I'd rather sort of grab something when it's there and happening and then move on to the antithesis of probably a classic landscape photographer, maybe.
So it's like the newness to you that pulls you in.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Can I have your third number, please?
And number 7,
Number
please.
7. What other things have you done in life that have helped you most with your photography business? That question's from Liz.
Liz. So I think my previous jobs, I moved to France and I taught at a university for a few years. Then I qualified as a teacher within the French system and was a civil servant. That taught me I didn't like being a civil servant.
Uh-huh.
I moved to Turkey and worked as a rep, and then I got a job on a little sailing yacht, and then I moved onto super yachts, and I'd never cooked a meal that said I could cook, so I became a chef on super yachts. So I think all that taught me that I just don't think too much about things, and
Yeah.
I'm, I'm just always optimistic. So famous last words, things generally I think go right for me because
Yeah.
I feel like they're going to be right. Some people might think that it's not right, but for me, I always find a good outcome.
And adaptability as well.
Yeah. So my photography business, if I hadn't been quite so spontaneous, if I'd thought of things through more, I maybe would have never, booked the first craft fair without, I didn't even have a car, I don't think. And
Yeah.
then I booked it and I started getting my prints and then realized that it was physically impossible to get there. So it was then bought a car to be able to get to a craft fair.
Yeah.
And for my business now, definitely getting on with people and
Hmm.
chatting to, you know, everybody. And I'm quite an introvert. I'm exhausted at the end of the day at the market, but at the time, I do enjoy talking to the people. And I guess that goes back to working on yachts. You know, you just have to, you can't decide that you don't get on with some people. You have to find common ground with everybody.
What you were saying about, giving things a go and being adaptable, it made me think a lot of people spend time sort of thinking and planning, well, I'll do this when I've done this course. Oh, well, and then they discover something else they don't know. So they do that. And then they have to buy this other piece of kit. And I was talking
Yeah,
with someone else the other day, and she was sort of saying, I just need to give this a go with the kit I've got and then see whether I need anything else. And, with podcasts, for example, I know of people who just do their podcasts on their phone because that's what they've got. And they find out whether they've got something interesting to say. If they have, then it's the time to get the microphone and the camera and stuff. And I
yeah,
think it's a sensible way to go.
definitely. So I started off with my D750, um, and I'd got my Sigma 105 that I still love it, and I had a 70 200 2.8.
Hmm.
So, and I had I think, a 35, like a really, my lenses were really old, but they were very good for,
Yeah.
back in the day, they were pro lenses. So for me, they were still really good. And I remember my first shoots, and I'd do some with a 70 200, and then I'd put on the 105 because that meant that even if the dog was close to me, I could get a photo.
Hmm.
And I got some brilliant photos using that lens, just absolutely gorgeous. And I hardly ever use it now because now I've got the proper gear, but it's more foolproof, but there's definitely
Yeah.
less of the edge of, deceit. What's going to happen here? So it's interesting that that has changed. But I definitely started with the gear that I had, and and it worked. It was really good, and I
Yeah.
only upgraded when I got the opportunity to upgrade, and I knew that I was busy enough to sort of justify it because it
Yeah.
is a lot of money, and you it helps definitely. But I was doing really good work with an older camera and older lenses.
Okay. So can I have your fourth number, please?
Number 4, please.
Are there any technical lessons you've learned that changed the way you shoot? That question's from Anne.
Yeah, so technical lessons, I know my camera really, really well, and I don't
Hmm.
know every single thing about it. So I don't, the astrophotography settings, I really haven't learned those because it's not what I need for the pets. But when I'm shooting pets, I know while we're walking along or while I'm laying down, if the eye focus is going to the bum, not the eye, for example, I can change that instantly and nobody will ever know. I've also learnt that people don't always like the blur as much as I do. So I make sure that I always get some sort of lovely creative shots, but I know how to get the more classically, technically
Yeah.
sharp front to back of the dog so that the average owner who loves all my blurry, shooting through portraits at the end of the day, if they want just a classic, no grass in front of the face sort of thing, they can have that as well. So, yeah, technically it is important. And yeah, I've just learned how to use my camera really well. But I think I always did. And that's
Yeah.
the point of shooting sort of on the go like that, is knowing how to
Hmm.
change when you need to.
I guess commercially it makes sense to have a range of styles as well. So like that client might be all about the shallow depth of field and love that blur, but they might want to buy a picture for Auntie Mabel who prefers front to back sharpness or something like that.
Yes,
So give them the option to buy one for
yes,
somebody else as well.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And yeah, thinking about the technical thing, that's just reminded me. So shoots in bluebells
Hmm.
with dogs, the white balance can be an absolute nightmare. So,
Yeah.
and I never shoot auto white balance. I always set it, but even then, with light coming through trees at different angles and the colours of a green and a sort of purpley bluebell and the colour of a dog, that can take ages. And all I do for that is edit post to sort of get the white balance matching, but I don't sort of use auto white balance, for example, with that,
Mhm.
because that would create even more issues.
Okay. Right. Time for your penultimate number.
Number 8, please.
You photograph everything from garden birds to domestic pets. Do you find your technical approach changes when switching between wild subjects and commissioned pet portraits? That question's from Caroline.
Yeah, nice question, Caroline. Um, the only difference is it sort of what we were just talking about really is when it's wildlife and stuff, I do go more creative these days.
Yeah.
And I do less creative with the pets. I did recently do some proper ICM running with a dog, but that was a friend of mine, and I knew that we'd got the time. And if it didn't work, he wasn't expecting it anyway. And if it did work, it was more for me than for him. So that's
Mhm.
something that I'd like to introduce in the future, but I keep that more for my personal stuff. So I'll I'll do some creative stuff, but it's more about soft focus and, very shallow depth of field and shooting through with the pets. And I'll do um, mostly that with my own wildlife and very little kind of straight wildlife photography these days.
Okay. So your last number, please.
Numero uno, please.
How do you typically manage high energy or nervous animals to ensure you get those calm, expressive shots that we see in your gallery? That's another question from Caroline.
Hey, Caroline. So with the active dogs, before a shoot, when they book or if people are interested, I've got a list of how a shoot runs that I send to them that sort of covers the basics. And then a few days before the shoot, I send them another more detailed list. One of the things is if your dog's active, try and get a bit of the energy run off before we meet. Um,
Yeah.
and we do the running and jumping at the start of the shoot in the hope that by the end the dog's a little bit tired and will calm down. um, More and more, so that was how I've always done it in the last few months, depending on the if the dog isn't particularly hyper, then I'll try and get some calm shots at the start, because there is the risk that when the dog suddenly realizes it's playtime for an hour, that they just go hyper and then they don't calm down at all for the whole hour. So it depends on the pet. But if the owners say, "Oh my God, you're never going to photograph this dog because she never sits still," and I'm like, "I promise you I will," but I always ask them to get a little bit of excess energy run off before we begin. Then I start with the action shots. And then because of how I do it, generally we go for a walk, then it almost obliges the dog to slow down a little bit at some point. And then I'll walk ahead or drop back and just be ready for that sort of when the dog does do something cute and slow.
Yeah. Do you find that your clients often say, "Oh, the dog is much better behaved for you than it is for me," or anything like that?
No, what I do find quite often is that people um, overestimate how well behaved their dog is, and I'm getting to judge that. So it's
Right.
a bit sort of yeah, my dog's brilliant, that's great, and now I think it's probably not going to
Mm.
be. But again, I'm more used to dogs that run free than dogs that sit and obey every single command. When that happens, I'm actually a little bit like, oh, right, okay.
Okay.
I don't need to go into wildlife mode to think about
Yeah.
this.
Have you ever had a dog just disappear? It got a bit too free and wild and ran off.
Mm, sort of, but he didn't go far. I've had the opposite actually. There was a gamekeeper who brought his 3 spaniels, and they didn't want to leave him because they really,
Yeah.
they're trained to just obey him. And when he'd say go and run free, they were like, "Oh, you've never told us to do that before. Why?"
It's a bit weird.
Yeah,
Yeah.
how are we going to do that now? So,
Oh,
yeah.
it's cute. Well, Philippa, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. It's been lovely chatting with you.
It's been brilliant, Angela. Thank you very, very much.
You're very
And thanks for the
welcome.
questions.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining me for this episode of the SheClicks Women in Photography podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Special thanks to everyone who sent in a question. You'll find links to Philippa's website and social media channels in the show notes. I'll be back with another episode soon, so please subscribe to the show and tell all your friends and followers about it. You'll also find SheClicks on Facebook, Instagram and YouTube if you search for SheClicksNet. So until next time, enjoy your photography.